Welcome, everybody. So happy to have you all here today. We're just about ready to get started here, maybe about another 30 seconds. We'll let you get settled in, get your audio connected, and if you want to join us on camera, your video as well. Um, my name is Tracy Madej Karageorge, and I'm happy to be your facilitator here today. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat box, let us know where you're joining us from today, who's joining us, and maybe your program. We'll do some chat box introductions, and then we'll get going. All right, a nice group. Okay, so we got a couple other people joining us. We'll let them get in and get settled. Welcome. Thank you for introducing yourselves in the chat box. I'm so happy to have you all here today. I think we have a pretty full session worth of content and sharing, so we'll go ahead and get started. But before we do, I'll just let you know that we are recording today, and that your participation in today's session is your consent to be recorded. And before we dive into our session on distance learning, our distance learning series about connecting and engaging students offline, I'll play a little disclaimer here for you.
This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred.
All right. Thank you, Sarah, for that full disclaimer. For today's session, my name is Tracy Madej Karageorge. I'll be facilitating today's session. I am joined by some folks who may be familiar to you, my colleagues who are part of the OIE Technical Assistance team. I've got Olana Lilly and Sarah Brightwell on the call here today. They'll be helping to monitor the chat box and also contribute to our discussion and share some ideas as we move through today's session. If you're having any technical challenges or issues, Sarah can give you a hand, and we'll also have our other colleague Rashad on to help with any of those issues. You can just drop us a note in the chat box if you're having any challenges with your audio or visual, and we'll do our best to give you some help along the way. All right. So here are our objectives for today's session. We hope to offer you some fresh takes today on some offline distance learning strategies, and to explore some ways to implement offline distance learning strategies. I know that we have collected some ideas from the field, things that we have seen to share with you, but you may also be doing some of these things and have some insights and tips or new and additional ideas to share. And so I definitely want to hear from all of you throughout today's session, both in the chat box and during some open discussion times where we can come off mute and share. We want to explore some emerging strategies for leveraging limited internet access, where we know some communities may have maybe completely without internet, or maybe have some access to internet, as well as some ways to engage in some safe in-person learning strategies and some strategies that are being used in the field there. So last year, shifting to offline, remote, and home-based learning totally disrupted that typical normal person-to-person, student-to-teacher, parent-to-teacher exchange that we normally experience. That exchange or feedback loop of communication where we take in information and respond to each other was totally disrupted. And we know that feedback loop is a cornerstone of communication, but also really important for learning and development. So throughout this session, we want to highlight those ways that we can engage in that feedback loop or that ongoing exchange with students and families in offline, hybrid, as well as in-person settings. If you think about it, working in and reaching students in offline environments is not new to our Native communities. And in fact, many of our traditional ways of teaching and learning didn't involve electronic or didn't digital technologies. And they, in fact, could be a source of inspiration for our current situation. We know that given everything that we have and are enduring, there is a lot of resiliency in Native communities and so much creativity across all our grantees. And these are tremendous resources to tap into as we adjust, adapt, and overcome these challenges of engaging students and families in our current situation. So I definitely want to encourage liberal use of that chat box as we share, um, as well as some open discussion during. We can take ourselves off mute to talk. You might have some tips of things that you have shared or things that you've picked up in your journey along the way. Okay, so no one really had the luxury of a pandemic planning period to prepare for this upheaval to our everyday life. And now, even a year later, after this all started, we continue to work in offline and hybrid settings. And many of us are finding ourselves in that situation of having to prepare for quick shifts to, some in-person, to a hybrid or 100% remote and home-based learning. So one idea to help with that planning and organizing could be to conduct a device inventory or a gadget scan to get a full picture of what options and opportunities exist to not only communicate but also engage in that feedback loop and put content in front of our students and families, depending on the type of technology or resources that you find you have available in the home. Uh, I said home, but you may also want to do a device inventory of your own program archives. I have a few things to share from my own archives as I prepared for today that I will share for you shortly. So on the screen, you see a pyramid. This is similar if you're familiar with some schools or that use, like, say, a response to intervention where they have tiered levels of support for maybe behavior or academic supports. Or some states have used this kind of a graphic to organize their various levels of support to schools that are, performing well or maybe need some greater levels of support. Um, in this case, our pyramid is capturing communication devices as well as some audio visual technologies that we know we have available based on that gadget scan that we took. So you might already collect some contact information, from your students and families about, what is the best mode to communicate? What do they prefer, phone or email? Do they prefer to be reached at home or at work or a certain time of day? Um, that you can take this same idea and look at what sorts of devices are available in the home. What level of access of internet do families have, and maybe perhaps even what access to transportation or what ability folks have to be mobile if your strategy includes, say, a pickup or drop off strategies. So in our example, in the bottom tier here, we have found that most of our families have some access to email. There is some availability for cell phones, and then we do have some families that have both a computer and some limited Wi-Fi. So for the bulk of our families in this example here, we can use strategies involving cell phones, computer, and email. But we might find that there is a group of in our community that don't have access to cell phones, and in fact, they rely on landlines. We find that they do have some access to transportation, and so we might be able to use the pickup and drop off method to engage, to provide materials as well as engage in those feedback loops. Uh, Access to radios might be, or other technology and hardware might be available in this tier that we could leverage. And finally, that top tier, we might find that we have a handful of families that really have no internet, no hardware to support the use of digital media in the home. And so for these families, we might have to rely on, mail, pickup and drop off, and strategies that don't rely on those electronic formats. So this particular slide we've devoted to communication technologies and ways to exchange information and support those feedback loops, but it really might be helpful to think more broadly about technology and include other types of tools or equipments or technologies that are in your typical homes. For example, thinking about your typical kitchen and what you would find in your kitchen. A stove could be a form of technology, or perhaps fishing gear, whether it's a fishing pole or fishing spears and nets and drying racks and weirs. Does a family have a garden? How can we use the things that are in the home as a way to engage students in learning, to engage students and families in learning experiences? Excuse me. Building on that idea, using even a simple pen and paper or something to write on and write with, and a simple activity to support language and literacy development could be to create name tags for everyday household items in both English and the native language, if your native language is written. So you would have little name tags on your chair or your table or the bed or the refrigerator, the stove, to help create not only practice in using those words, but also seeing the words in both English and the native language can support both literacy in both areas. So connecting home environments with learning is one of those core practices around being culturally responsive. There's been some really good work in this area across Indian nations. So thinking about, I encourage you to be thinking about these different ideas, as well as how we can engage in those feedback loops, so students can share what they're learning. Okay, so building now further on this idea of pen and paper, you know, I think we can't ever underestimate the power of a handwritten note. And given everything that we're facing and the disconnections and loss that our communities are experiencing, making some personal connections can really support that social emotional needs and well-beings of our family. And that this is really our present situation has underscored how this is more important than ever. So a personal letter from you or program staff could be used as a check-in, or maybe a note of appreciation. Oops, sorry about that. A note of appreciation, or maybe some encouragement to participate in a particular learning activity. But some other ideas could be to use this as an opportunity to start a pen pal activity, connecting students with each other while they're not physically in a school building, or maybe starting a pen pal exchange with an elder, and engaging with some of our family members in this way that supports our learning objectives. Okay. This is a quick a quick overview of some of the main buckets of strategies. And I see some people are already sharing ideas in the chat box. Keep it coming, I love it. So we're going to talk today about some major buckets, and you may be using some of these already. So home kits are one idea that we'll touch on. Sets of materials that are either sent or delivered to households that have some materials that students and families can engage with. Strategies for using telephones, not necessarily cell phones, but landlines, if your families and communities have access to those. And radio. Radio, we know, is a vital communication link, as well as entertainment. And maybe we can use radio programming to engage our students in some learning activities. And then television. Local stations, public broadcasting stations, might have programming, again, that can be leveraged to support learning in the home. So we'll talk about a couple of strategies in that realm. Here in the bottom row, we see some strategies for some hybrid situations and small in-person groups. So some communities are organizing around strategies to make internet more accessible and to bring them to families and communities and residents. We'll take a look at that, as well as some smartphones. Even if you are live in a remote community where signals can be spotty, we'll think about some ways to explore using cell phones, again, to engage in those feedback loops and put content in the hands of our families and students. And then finally, of course, if local guidelines or community members allow, you may be able to convene in some small groups, and we'll highlight some things that are happening in the field around that. Okay, but first, before we jump into the rest of these, I would like to put a poll up and hear from all of you. So you should see that poll here shortly. And I just would love for you to check all that apply and let us know, what strategies have you used to engage and connect with students and families? Are you using home kits? Do you rely on landlines? Are you using radio, television? Maybe you have some initiatives around some traveling Wi-Fi, or you've looked at using smartphones in some different ways. All right. I'm able to see the results in real time, and if you're not, we will make sure that you do see the final results, but it looks like smartphones are a strategy. Home kits, about 20 of you have been using that. Landlines as well. Okay, not so much the radio and televisions. We've got a couple of people though who have looked into that, as well as some traveling Wi-Fi. All right, and some small groups too. Well, this is I'm really excited to see all these responses, because that tells me that you all are exploring these strategies and have probably learned some things along the way. Maybe you do something differently today that you didn't do in the beginning, and that's all great information to share. So don't underestimate what you've learned and what you have to share. It might be just what somebody needs to hear as they also test out some of these strategies. So thank you for sharing all that. Okay, we're going to set that aside, and actually we're going to go ahead and get started with our sharing on home kits. We're going to hear from one of our grantees today, Mrs. Susan Paskvan, who is the Native Language Coordinator at the Yukon Koyukuk School District in Alaska. She leads the activities for their NAL Ed grant up there, and she has very kindly agreed to share with us how her program has been working to engage students and families that have little or no access to the internet. So with that, Susan, I will let you take it away.
Okay, Bassie Tracy, Susan Paskvan Suuza Dahun Danaga Halte Itsu Seasni. Danakanaga Yet Benti Hat Anakanaga Hadoha de Dahun Hadok Ochtel Echna. Yukon Koyukuk School District. Aka Gonsini, Native Language Coordinator, Aslan. I said I'm learning Danakanaga, our language, Danaga, which is Koyukon Athabaskan, and Benti Anakanaka, which is the language of Minto. So we have two languages, and like all of you, last March we were put into the mode of remote teaching. So right before that, when we started to get an inkling in the beginning of March, I was like, okay, what are we going to do? Okay, we can, the kids know how to play games. So then we thought up the idea of making home kits. And, but first I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. A land acknowledgement is acknowledging the place that we're at, wherever we are across the world here, across the United States. So this one is in Danaga. Here, I live and work in the land of the Koyukon Athabascan people. So it's just something that acknowledges, you know, the people of the place. And so I welcome you to Alaska. The red areas are the Athabascan languages. They're related languages. So within our region, we have Danaga and Benti Kanaga. So this deep red and the salmon colored one. Okay, basket for that one. And the area that we work in is Yukon Koyukuk School District. And this map at the bottom, the light blue shows the contiguous lower 48 is what we call them. And then there's Alaska with the darker blue, and the region that we teach in is highlighted in white. These are the villages. Most of our villages are fly in, meaning you can't drive there. You have to fly, or in the winter or summer, you travel by snow machine or boat. But nowadays there isn't much inter-village travel. A lot of the villages go on lockdown, so they're really remote. Their only mode of transportation is the by airplane. And our villages, we have small schools. Except for one school, all of our teachers teach in multi-grade classrooms at multi-level. And so we have one teacher that could be teaching kindergarten to third grade, and another one that's third grade to sixth grade. So you have quite a widespread there. And all of our communities have at least 2 teachers, and paraprofessionals, what are our teacher aides. So when I do my teaching, I do it over video conference. And we do have the benefit of having great internet at our schools. And so each of our schools have a video conference unit. And just like we have this Zoom meeting today, it's similar to that. So I'm able to share my screen, and then I have my whiteboard right here. And so when we're doing sentences, I can switch things out and students can see it. When we went remote, since it was in March, we had several units. Through the NOL grant, we made a workbook, one for each of our 2 languages. And in that workbook, we have 10 units. So here's one of our workbooks. And in the 10 units, we had gone through about 4 of them. No, it's a little bit more than that. Yeah, I think we went about 6 units when we went into lockdown. So we looked at, okay, what is it that the students already know how to do? So it was building on what units we did. It was the family, feelings, weather. We didn't do the animals yet, but from prior knowledge, they had some of that. And then because they were working in the home, even though they didn't have the food unit, I wanted them to know the food and utensils around their house. And so we worked with a local printer. I used InDesign to design the unit. And so we sent home a packet. And in this packet, this one is Bentikut Anakanaga, the language of the Minto people. On the folder is like, okay, if they want to make their own bingo games, and then we gave them little manipulatives. So this would be their game pieces. We put some binder clips in there so they can have the binder clips, and had it look very similar to the actual workbook they had at school. And then the first couple of pages are notes to parents, what's involved in this kit and kind of a schedule for last spring, and then some essential language that they would need to play the games, and then instruction on games. And we even put a little picture in there, diagrams of how to play the different games. And a lot of it involved something that all of you are familiar with. So we have, like, this is the family unit. And so this one is members of the family, and we put them on business cards. And so in the back, we use the cards like you get for baseball cards. And so one of them, this is the family one of them has the name, like this says N-A and Son for mom. And then over here, it doesn't have the Benti name. So students can work on the skill first, if they need to familiarize themselves, and then they can challenge themselves without the word on this. So we designed that in InDesign, and then sent it to our local printer. And Holly, our native language assistant here in the language program, she assembled all of these kits. And our schools, they had to switch to making kits and sending it home. And so the teachers at the schools, when I teach, I have co-teachers. So like I'm delivering the instruction here in Fairbanks and going remote, and the classroom teacher is in the classroom with the students. And so it's not the most effective way of teaching native language, but with our limited number of speakers who are able to teach every day, that's what works for us. And so the co-teachers out at the schools, they would take these kits, and they had made up their own kits for their core instruction, reading, writing, and math, and they would deliver those to the homes. And so in here, we wanted so they would have fun. You know, it wasn't like a set time every day that they would do it, but that they would practice their language. And it wasn't just the vocabulary too. So like on the progression of skills, like on the family names, once they were able to know that vocabulary, they build up to the sentences. In discussing family, they could ask, how's your mom doing? Oh, my mom is fine. Going from the feelings of I'm fine to he or she is fine. And so some of the families, you know, they would write back on social media that they were playing games with their students. And it turns out that with our language status up here, the students often know more than the parents. So the students became the teachers. And so that was helpful for both the families, you know, to connect that. And I noticed that when coming back this fall, you know, on some of the other skills, they lost quite a few skills, but they're just picking up right where they left off in the Denaga. Their pronunciation has been really good, and they're building sentences. We're working towards a little bit more conversational. Since we do have a lot of schools going into lockdown, we're also we're going to work with the tribe, and we're sending them, Holly is just putting together now, but this is like using flippity.net. That was one of our OIE sessions. I made bingo cards. And so this one is just the pictures. And then these are the business cards that'll be sent to the tribes. On your technology, one thing that's popular in our villages up here, people have VHF radios. And so VHF, you know, you just get on the CD. So this is my vision. I'm hoping it will work. That the tribe will give these cards to a speaker in the village, and the families will turn on their VHF radio and they can play bingo together. And so it's a little bit more vocabulary than I introduced to them at school, but I think they would have fun in learning in that. And some other ideas, I'm thinking about doing a scavenger hunt, because we can't be responsible for gatherings outside of school, but if they do like a scavenger hunt around the village, I was thinking that we could put up little cards and laminate them, and then they can go, and it'll be a clue to go find the next one, so they can write their clues down and maybe turn that into the tribe for prizes. Just trying to think really out of the box. What are some fun outdoor things for them to do to keep up with their language, and also to get the whole family involved to revitalize our language programs. And on the other side of teaching in the schools, we're doing a lot of the keeping up with the curriculum, and trying to get more involved in reaching out to the homes, trying to figure out ways that the families can access the language. At their work, they have internet. So we've also developed a lot of online resources. For example, for each one of these pictures, we use like liveworksheets.com, and we can put the audio in there and put sentences, and students can drag and drop. And so providing a lot of those audio resources. And I'm going to look at one of the avenues of sending jump drives home. I have these on the internet, so I've just got to figure out how to design it on a jump drive so that they can click on a page and use the audio so that they can hear it. And on working with the tribes, I'm hoping to open that up. That we have 10 tribes within our region, and some of them have youth programs. So collaborate with them on things that we can provide support, and they can gather. If they go like on a scavenger hunt walk, they can set a time, and they say, okay, that you have between these 2 hours to do that, and they could kind of help facilitate it. Where the teachers, it's not all on the co-teacher's responsibility. And let me see. So yep, we're thinking about different ways for incentives. We're designing the games. I got to work on the incentives for what works. Sometimes, so our teachers, like at one village, they offered a incentive if they went on lockdown. Lockdown means that the school is shut down. The people are only allowed to go to the post office and to the store. They aren't allowed to visit between homes. So when they're on lockdown, then the teachers take the packets, weekly packets, and they deliver it to the students' homes along with their breakfast and lunch. And then every 2 or 3 days, they'll pick up those packets and grade them. And if students turn in their packets, they offer them incentives. They have like student funds. The students have raised money. And so they'll give like $7 at the local store. So we found that was a good incentive for some of our schools, and other ones, they're just like coupons. You can have extra time when you come back, like in the gym. So I hope that was helpful to all of you. We found it was been a lot of fun, even though the students are home. I kind of keep up with them on social media through their parents.
Great, Susan. Thank you. There's so many good ideas packed into that little presentation. I see we have a couple of questions in the chat box, so I'll just lift those up if that's all right. You mentioned, well, the question is, did you work with a graphic designer or have someone in house that your materials look very nice and professional? Oh, you're on mute. Did we mute?
I'm always used to going right on mute right away. Okay, so when we were designing our workbook, we asked the Yukon Native Language Center in Canada. They have this great book, teaching curriculum, and we asked them for permission to use their images. And we just added color to them because they were black and white. Yeah, that was a major hurdle, getting in all of these images for all of the family and animals and feelings. And a lot of it we've just developed through our own skills of having like InDesign. And I do believe I provided Sarah with a link so that these cards, let me bring it up real close. Okay, so right here, it might have the animal name, and I think I gave it to her last year and I could double check, but underneath it, you could just take that out and insert your own language. You can use a PDF if you have Adobe Acrobat and just change it to your language. We have several dialects. And so, for example, under the Fox, we have it in central, lower, and then even though there's two lower villages, one uses Nachmai and then the other one uses two more words. So that kind of takes care of the language program. And then because we have two languages, we have to totally redo the Benti words because they're different from the Denaga words. But I think Sarah can share that PDF. I have it on my computer somewhere.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
I'll
I'd
put it in the
put a
chat
link up
box
there.
right now.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Sarah.
And Susan, would you mind mentioning the name of the language group in Canada one more time?
Oh, Yukon Native Language Center there in Whitehorse.
Thank you.
So we bought their book and then reached out to their executive director for permission to use their images.
And I see Sarah has also dropped a couple of other links, resources that you've mentioned along the way about, let's see, live worksheets is one, and Flippity Grid or Flippity Net, sorry.
Yeah, flippity.net. That's the one where you can design like bingo cards. So there's a set of 20. So 20 different bingo cards. You can do a board game. In my classroom teaching, because we can't have students touch each other's, like when they're playing on board socially distanced. So then I show the board game, and then I'm able to move the characters on it without the students having to get up out of their seat. Everything to be socially distanced. It really changed up our teaching a little bit.
Do we have any more questions for Susan or? I see there's a question here about a copy of a possible copy of the workbook, and I think that's what Sarah has popped in a link there to a PDF, a blank, which is a blank template for the flashcards, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
For the home learning kit. So if you open
Wow.
it up, Susan provided a great template / example of her home learning kit, and you can download it right there from the chat box where it says, it's a little file and it says the Denaga blank template.
And I'd say, I don't remember if I shared with you like the instructions for the games. We have like, the games are concentration or memory, tap, board game, go fish, snatch, and bingo. I don't know if I provided that with you. If not, then I can send it to you and you can send it out later.
Perfect.
Great. Any other questions? Thinking about home kits and ideas for activities in the home and what that might look like.
And I see someone asked if they could get a copy of the workbook. I could save that as a PDF and send it to Sarah. So that would be, the workbook is this large document here. This one here, which has the 10 units, and then the homeschool kit is just this small one for the families. Oops, Tracy, I think you're on mute.
Oh, no, you're right. I'm sorry. That was my turn to be on mute now. I was just saying thank you so much for being so generous and sharing your work and all these great materials. Um, so there is a question here about remote locations with your remote locations before COVID. Have you always utilized electronic communications?
So before, I think it was like around 2005, we started using video conference, and the quality was horrid back then. I look back at it now. And we used a combination. We have 10 villages. And so as part of my job, I traveled to each of the villages each semester. Um, and that really helped to build a relationship with the students, which is, something we haven't been able to travel since last March. But we've always used the technology, and some teachers who come to teach in our district, they're so amazed how much technology that we actually use, not only for our native language, but some of the other programs. And for the online resources, I try to provide as much as I can for our co-teachers, because some of them are native to the village, and they know the language and they can pick it up and teach it. But some of them are new to the village, they're non-native, but they're just jumping right in there, and I really applaud them for learning our language right along with the students. But they need those additional resources um, to pronounce the vocabulary and make sentences with students. So we are a very high-tech school district.
Wonderful. Well, if you think of more questions, I encourage you to keep sharing in the chat box. We're going to talk through a few more ideas about home kits and then a couple other strategies, but then we'll pause and we'll let everyone kind of take themselves off mute to share either things that you're trying or things that you're are working for you and tips you've shared along the way. So thank you so much, Susan. I really appreciate your sharing. And we will be sharing not only today's slides and links, but also a collection of links that we've compiled in preparation for today, as well as the ones that are going up in the chat box. Okay. All right, thank you. Please continue to type into that chat box as you think of questions or new ideas. So on the screen are some other additional ideas, some of which Susan mentioned. Maybe some of you are using these ideas. The first set of bullet points there are just different options for providing audio recordings and content in your home kits. So when I did my gadget scan of my archive or my desk drawer here, I pulled out a few things. One of them is this older iPod, right? It's about 10 years old now, but you can put audio files on here, including music or podcasts. This one actually has I can put photos on here. But you don't have to have photos. I know not all of them allow photos. But I know that there are also some non-name brand iPod devices that are available in the market. Maybe your program has some already, or maybe you'd be interested in purchasing some for as a means for supporting those home kits. I also pulled up a USB recorder, right? Some of you might have these or have used these. It says USB, but you actually don't need anything other than this little device to record or listen to audio files. If this was a part of a home kit, maybe you're exchanging it back and forth. It does have a little USB that slides in and out that you can download those student files. Say if they're recording some responses to a language or and you want to give some feedback, you can download it into your computer or upload a new file with some feedback and assignments on there. Or even because you can organize it into files and have file A, B, or C. Have a file for parents where there's some parent directions or some translations of those activities. Audio CDs, your computer may have, my older computer actually still has the ability to play and record CDs, but that might be another way to put some audio or visual content if you know your families have the ability to play those in the home, maybe on a computer or maybe on a CD player. And gosh, if you go way back, I even found some examples of this old tape. And maybe maybe we have some tape recorders that we can use as home kits, or show some of our younger students some older technology that some of us grew up with, and to record. Exchange is again a way to engage in that feedback loop, or record songs, or other language type activities. I know Susan shared some ideas for using thumb drives, right? And this is definitely a nice way to put digital content and make it portable. Even if a family doesn't have internet access, we can put files on here and distribute those out so that they can access those files. Again, maybe there's a student file and a parent file. So a parent has some tips for how to support their student in doing the activities, or maybe there's activities for both of them. You can put podcasts, or download podcasts, or maybe you have weekly or monthly newsletters to include on here in a USB drive. But I'd love to hear from you all, how, if you are using these devices, what other ideas do you have for using other devices other than USB drives, or what can we put on USB drives to include in our home kits? A few more tips from home kits. And again, we're going to have a list of links and resources to share with you after today. There were some really nice pieces in there about supporting learning in the home, making sure that families, not just students, but the whole family feels supported. So a couple of things that I lifted up from there are around, well, you may need to make sure, depending on the technology that you're using, ensure some understanding of how to use them. Whether you're using some newer technology or older technology, it might be good to have a little handout in there. There's, some tips for troubleshooting and that sort of thing. Clear, concise directions, right? Not too wordy. We're not using jargon that maybe folks wouldn't understand. Making sure that they flow and are easy to follow. And then those multimodal strategies to engage learners. Susan shared all kinds of examples for seeing and hearing and speaking and touching on different things. So where we can, incorporating those multimodal strategies into those home learning kits. Some other ideas that might help a home learning kit, might help parents and families and students use their home learning kits, providing a daily or a weekly checklist to stay organized, right? Something, maybe it's a hard copy, maybe it's an electronic copy, but something maybe they can either print themselves, or it's already printed. They can put it up on the refrigerator and sort of check off those activities from the day, or maybe the weekly activities, to help them sort of track progress and maybe even get a little bit of motivation that they're making progress and completing those assignments. That visual cue can help to stay organized. Choice can be a really important thing at any age, really, especially when we're so restricted in where we're able to go and what we're able to do. But infusing some level of choice into those activities might be really useful. So on the screen, you actually see one example of how some folks have incorporated choice into some learning activities using a bingo choice board. So in this example, each square has an activity or a task for students to complete based on the learning objectives. And we've seen folks use these a few different ways, and maybe you even have some other ideas. One could be that students simply choose their own path to a bingo. So, they choose a line up or down or diagonal. And those are the activities that they complete. Another way we've seen this used is that each square has an assigned point value depending on what the activity is. And the assignment is that the student has to accumulate a target number of points. So they can choose any of the activities that add up to that target number of points. A third way could be simply to choose an activity from any category. Um, so once those activities are completed, that bingo card is returned, possibly maybe with some other evidence of learning or the completion of their tasks. And that bingo card could even be used to earn towards something, a privilege, award, or recognition. I know we've talked a little bit about incentives here already today. And then the last idea on there is a weekly exit pass. So you might have, completed an exit pass as a student, or maybe you use it in your classrooms. And how translating this idea to a remote setting where a student might have a prompt, a reflection prompt. They could record either verbally or in a written form. Maybe it's a problem solving or a task or a specific activity, but something that's tied to those learning objectives that they can then submit, that gives you some formative information about what students are learning. So those are some ideas with home kits, and I see you're sharing in the chat box. So keep that going. If you have any ideas or have used these in other ways, we want to continue to hear from you. We're going to talk through a few more things, and then we'll pause for discussion. So landlines. Many of us still have landlines in our home. And there are some creative ideas for using landlines to engage in those exchanges. One-on-one calls are great for personal connections or checking in, maybe even problem solving with students and families. A conference call might be a way to engage groups of students or adults, maybe through a language circle or through a read aloud. That could be either we dial in and hear a story be read to us, or maybe if you have book sets and you're able to get those into your households, you can even do a round robin reading over the phone with your students. Voicemail. Although we usually think of that sort of as a backup if we miss a call, but maybe we're using this as an intentional strategy to capture some responses and some of that communication loops, especially maybe we're thinking about cell phones. If access to cell phone is intermittent, that could be a strategy, but also for landlines, because sometimes we're just out and about. And phone trees. So I know many of you on the that are here today have used or maybe still use them to communicate down the line important information. Where you set up, a list, and it starts at the top. Somebody initiates and they call two people, and then those two people call two people, and then those two people call two people, until eventually everyone has received the message. This literal telephone game, if you will. But maybe this is something that can be used to have students talk to one another about things that are going, or maybe there's a prompt. I wrote down Susan's idea of a scavenger hunt. Maybe students are finding a clue and then passing that clue on to the next person as a way to engage in some conversation and learning. But I'd love, again, to hear other ideas from you about how we can leverage landlines. Radio is still a vital communication and entertainment link in many of our communities, and I know that many of you use radio to make community announcements, or share news, or information about events and schedules and that sort of thing. But we can also think about maybe how to leverage some programming on radio to engage students and families in activities. So you could simply make an assignment maybe to listen to a program. I know National Native News is broadcast on many public broadcasting stations. We could listen to a program and then maybe discuss it with some peers or teachers, or maybe provide a few reflection prompts that can be crafted to tie that radio content to a lesson, or maybe make some personal connections. Students can make some personal connections to there. Again, maybe the prompts are written, or maybe they're used in a conference call and combining some of these different media. So your local and regional public radio stations might have programming to look into. I know here in the Denver area, Rocky Mountain Public Radio has launched a Native storytelling initiative called Native Lens. And so we can actually go on there. There's, maybe 6-minute, 10-minute clips, which you could even capture and provide on a USB or something like that. Again, so if people can listen to it, respond to it, and use it as the basis of an activity. You may have some local stations such as public access, or some tribal radio stations, or maybe even some university student-run radio stations, where you would have even more influence and ability to impact the programming, right? Many moons ago, I worked in for a tribal nation where students actually developed programming and ran a little radio station of their own. That's a fairly big undertaking, but something more, a smaller step, a more feasible step, maybe could work with somebody at the radio station and do some radio interviews with the local Native role model, or tribal leaders, or some elders or Native speakers. It could be that you're just, again, listening to it, or maybe students could even be engaged with developing interview questions that are then used to interview that person on the air, or maybe even doing the interviews on the air. And I see some of you are sharing there in the chat box. I'd love if you have any examples of how you've leveraged those local radio stations to engage students and families. Love to hear some more ideas. Okay, television. So similar to radio, television is often a vital communication link, and there's actually been some fairly broad-based efforts, both at the national level as well as the state level, for where public broadcasting has brought together some of their content, some of their educational content, or worked even with teams of teachers from some of these larger school districts. So we have the examples up there of Los Angeles Unified School District, and Fairfax County in Virginia, where they actually brought groups from the public radio stations, the local public radio stations, and groups of teachers to think about and organize their scheduling to target different student groups or different subject areas, and even in some cases provided some resources for teachers, materials that can be used in collaboration with that television programming. You know, it's not only in our remote communities and our rural communities where we have that digital divide or that lack of infrastructure to provide, but in Los Angeles, they estimate that at least half of the students lack access to those digital tools, and about a quarter of families lack access to internet in the home. Some other examples that are happening in television. Oh, and I'll just back up one quick minute to say that in the list of resources that we'll share out, there actually has there's a link that lists not only the national public broadcasting resources, but by state, some of the different efforts that are happening to coordinate instructional resources with their content, with their broadcasting content. So we'll make sure that you get that as well. A couple other examples that we have on this page are not exactly television, but they're using television type technology to bring content to the homes. So one example that's happening up in Alaska, right, is where there really isn't in some places that infrastructure to provide internet. One of the stories that we have in that list of resources is about a local school district that's working with one of their area providers, using servers in the school and then distributing antennas throughout the community so that without access to the internet, they can actually put electronic or digital content into the homes. So they can deliver audio visual instruction remotely in an offline environment. And I see Susan nodding. She might even know some more about this effort there. Another strategy, something to keep an eye on as we move through this time in leveraging remote strategies is data casting. This is a strategy that does require some greater levels of coordination and investment from stakeholders, but we want to share a little bit about what it is. And this is happening in South Carolina, where they're actually using some of the broadcast signal from a television to deliver electronic content. So this is happening. This is a technology that's not exactly new. It has been used in public safety or in emergency type settings for a number of years, but it uses existing infrastructure and then transmits that encrypted IP data, again, with no internet required. People can send JPEGs or PDFs or MP4 audio files. And also that students need is a Wi-Fi enabled device, such as a computer or cell phone or tablet, and then an inexpensive antenna and receiver. And again, there's this is happening in South Carolina. It's kind of a growing pilot program right now using some of their CARES monies, but they recognize that 20%, so a fifth of their households don't have access to internet, and this is a strategy that they're using there. Okay, I want to pause now and give you some time to take yourselves off mute. You've been sharing some ideas. Maybe you've got some new ideas, or maybe you've been using these strategies and want to share a little bit. We would love to hear from you. What have you used? What tips can you share? What strategies would you like to try? We'll go ahead and unmute the big mute button so that you can unmute yourselves if you would like to share.
Well, and while people are thinking about what they're sharing, I can bring back up, Tracy, some of the things some of the people who shared in the chat box. Rebecca was sharing that their local college radio station does Word of the Day, and they live stream that online as well.
Yeah, I love that idea. Word of the day. I've passing through some tribal communities. I've heard some cool language programming using that idea as well.
I also think, this is Oleni, I also think what you mentioned earlier, we've been doing in our community around sort of going out into the environment, kind of like the scavenger hunt, and using the environment to develop vocabulary in Hawaiian language, which has been really impactful, as well as like Susan has shared, what you see around the house to develop, and utilizing like you said, the garden or regular practices in the household to develop the vocabulary, and also math and writing as well.
Thanks, Alani. You know, now that you mention it, I know we talked about some tips for some home kits, and we were talking about that idea of directions and providing directions in the native language. Did you want to share a few tips there?
Yeah, I think the USB is a great sort of tool to use, because I think a lot of times I come from immersion school, you want to make sure you're staying in the language with students, but sometimes parents don't necessarily have the same language skill like Susan was sharing. And so providing that instructions. Also, a lot of times our languages come up with academic vocabulary that you can't go to an elder or to a dictionary to locate. And so providing that academic vocabulary like glossary or term list also helps parents assist their students with learning.
Thank you.
I know using the jump drives, because ideally when we have a school go on lockdown, then the students would we have a one-to-one program with our Chromebooks. They'd be able to take it home. And I think one of our villages just is about to go live with their internet. They've worked with our internet provider so that the students can get the internet from the school and have it go to their home. And they just about have all the homes hooked up in the village. So we have one school on the road system, so they're trying that one. But the idea behind using the USB is because the Chromebooks don't have much storage on them. And so you can use like Flipgrid for doing your instructions. It's just a free video thing. You can put your like your board on one side and write out anything and then give your instructions in the language and put that in your jump drive and say, read me first or something on there. So yeah, we'll try it out with our first village going, having all internet in their homes.
Great. Okay. Well, if you do think of some questions or ideas, please keep chatting away in the chat box. Like I said, there is so much creativity and experience across our grantees that we really want to lift up your ideas and find out what's worked for you as well. So I'm going to go ahead and go through our strategies for accessing limited access to internet, as well as some small in-group strategies. Then we'll talk a little bit, we'll pause for some more discussion before we move into our wrap up and feedback portion of today. So traveling Wi-Fi. Our focus has been connecting, somewhat on connecting where the infrastructure is limited or maybe doesn't yet exist. But we also wanted to share and have been sharing some strategies for how we're bringing internet or Wi-Fi to and connecting families and students. So there has been a little bit of research out there on this in the past year. One of those groups is the National Center for Rural Education Research Networks, or the Center for Reinventing Public Education, were two groups that I found some interesting information from. So what they are finding is that, despite these challenges, that there's been a lot of creative actions to help families connect, including providing mapping locations in the local community that offer free internet to access. I know there's been some efforts in New Mexico to map communities both with and without internet, but even providing a little map of, where they might be able to go to get some get access to public Wi-Fi. I think some of you have already even mentioned, and I saw in the chat box, efforts to distribute hotspots, or using outdoor areas, such as on school grounds or public libraries, so students can go there, either download materials or upload their assignments. Another strategy that was out there even pre-pandemic, right? Is outfitting our buses with Wi-Fi. So we've heard about this in remote areas where students are spending significant amounts of time on the bus traveling to and from school. Some communities are taking this idea and using these as mobile hotspots to go into the communities. And so some of the insights and lessons learned from those are, from those efforts are, to think about choosing a secure area. It'll be safe for your families and students to be at. Determine what kinds of supervision might be needed to make sure, again, everyone keeps safe and uses these things uses the resources appropriately. And especially in our winter time right now, when it gets dark so early, you might want to consider choosing spots where there is lighting in the evening. And so again, so people are safe and secure if this is a strategy that you're interested in using or exploring. Smartphones. So we talked a little bit about landlines. We could use smartphones in some similar ways to engage in that conversation, feedback loops, whether it's through text messages or audio messages, or even some video recordings. Students might be asked to maybe complete an activity at home or maybe outside with their family, and then send a video clip or an audio reflection or maybe a picture of the end product. I know we'll want, if using that kind of a strategy, though, we definitely want to be mindful of, limitations around data use and broadband and that sort of thing. During last week's session on communicating with families, Olani shared some tools, Blooms, Remind, and Class Dojo, all of which allow you to create and schedule group texts or individual texts, as well as audio messages or invitations. And so those tools can help facilitate that two-way communication, in a safe environment that's monitored. You can even have families download these apps to access those features, those program features. Great for disseminating information, but we could also think about, again, how to engage students and families in those feedback and response loops. And maybe some of you have already been doing that. Okay. Small groups. So depending on your location and the status of things in your communities, you may be able to do some limited in-person interaction. Of course, following all appropriate precautions. This might be a strategy that is workable in your setting. So for outdoor activities, learning labs and outdoor activities is one idea where we could bring in the outdoor, engaged in learning in an outdoor setting, such as parks or maybe a cultural excursion of some sort. So many of our traditional activities do take place in outdoor settings. For example, the pictures on the screen here show the maple sugar camp that will be starting soon in the North Woods. Academic teachers and cultural or native language teachers could collaborate to develop activities that support some standards-based learning using a cultural setting. In this example of sugar camp, you could use it to practice the native language. There's also mathematic and science principles inherent in collecting sap and boiling and reducing it into syrup, and knowing how the weather could impact the flow. I'm sure that you already have some ideas, or maybe are using your seasonal outdoor activities to explore and support learning. Some schools are have organized around outdoor stations for food, equipment, and drop-off distribution. But some cases they're using these outdoor stations on, again, school grounds or public libraries, where students and families can access Wi-Fi, and students maybe are given a certain period of time to connect with the internet, using either their own or the school's devices with teachers and staff on hand. I know there's a lot of stories a lot of feel-good stories in the news about, teachers who are making home visits where it's allowed, if it's a simple, drive-by to say hello, or maybe they're dropping off materials for students, or awards in some cases. That might be a way to connect with students. This idea of learning pods is kind of growing. This is where you have a small group of students that stays in a small group, so that you're limiting interactions with larger groups, and the small group, maybe a couple of households, as a way to keep them safe and limit some kinds of exposures. These are being used in a range of formal and informal ways. Colorado has actually issued some guidance around different types of learning pods, some of which are actually sanctioned by school districts and involve a teacher, a certified teacher, that meet, in a remote setting with the same small group consistently over time. Versus others that may be, more tied to like homeschool learning, or maybe an informal community type setting with certain activities as well. And so they actually put together some nice guidance for communities, so they can decide if this is something right for them, or where they fit on that continuum. In Hawaii, they're actually using this idea. They're calling them micro learning hubs. This is a pilot that has started and will continue through the summer, in hopes of making it something more formal as a different type of learning design in Hawaii, to reach out to some of those rural and indigenous communities where Wi-Fi access is just not available right now. So in Hawaii, these learning hubs are using, again, small groups of students, using those authentic project-based hands-on learning activities, while also trying to bring some Wi-Fi to those communities to engage in learning. So I know they've done this on a handful of some of the smaller islands, and then they hope to kind of scale that up as they learn more in the fall. Last time on the list in this screen here, some of you may remember this idea of bookmobiles, right? Or traveling libraries that bring reading materials to children and families. So a bookmobile might make a regular stop at a family home or near a family home, where students could check out or exchange books. Although some do exist simply to distribute books for keeps. Mobile schools or labs with science equipment. This is using this idea to, include mobile labs to bring resources to remote and rural communities, or community, even urban communities, where we just don't have access to certain types of materials or equipment. We could adapt this idea to include cultural and academic learning kits, or equipment for different activities, such as sewing machines for making regalia or beading supplies. Items could be checked out, have a designated due date, and that way everyone gets the opportunity to use these things in the home and support learning. Okay, last chance here. I'd love to hear now what did you hear that inspired you? Have you tried any of these strategies? What have you learned along the way?
When you did have a couple of folks sharing over in the chat box, we had Julie who shared she does an early childhood education program with parents of 0 to 3-year-olds focused on language and literacy. And they've been doing home kits, sharing activities that they can do with items already in their home. And then also some virtual community events with book reading and crafts and videos. And then Nathan shared they've been doing some enrichment kits. So they surveyed the families to see if they wanted academic, enrichment, or cultural activities in their kits. And then they customized them with things like dice and dice game instructions for math, watercolors for art. And that was what they did kind of for their summer program this last year. So lots of great ideas there.
Thank you for sharing those. Yes. Oh, and I see Mary Kate has her hand up. Would you please, if you can take yourself off mute, we'd love to hear from you. Oh, are we able to take our members off mute?
Let me see if she's able to. Let's see.
Okay.
There we go.
Hi, my name is Mary Kate Lowry. I'm from Northwestern California. I work as the mobile maker technician for the Pathmakers program, which is a partnership with Blue Lake Rancheria and Humboldt County Office of Education. And the purpose and what my job is to bring native STEAM education, science, technology, engineering, art, and math in traditional culture and contemporary culture and TEK into K-8. And so what we've been doing is partnered with a lot of the 2 different Indian education programs, because there was some really awesome curriculum created by Klamath Trinity Joint Unified School District. And I was part of that team out there where Native educators created curriculum aligned with California state standards about local traditional culture, TEK, governance, politics, but inherent in that is so many of our NGS standards. So we took that as sort of our base and our rock, and then developed some hands-on activities, some maker activities, and really pulled a lot of resources from the community together. It's pretty awesome to, whether it's youth programs, tribal programs, Upward Bound at the college, having relationships with other people that are serving kids directly, and being able to kind of weave our program together as a cohesive requires a lot of talking. And I think the direct delivery in Zoom classrooms has been something that's been really awesome, and taking the videotapes of me, my children, other people we know who've gone out like into, you know, whether it's gathering acorns or processing some of the like gooseberries, or pulling those educational resources together. But I think the big thing for us is personal relationships, and it's sort of like that family tree, phone tree, but like community tree, where, you know, these people are connected and can talk to the kids that they're working with closely. One of our major activities is once a month we do a family maker night, which used to be hosted by sites, but now it's virtual. And we've partnered with Indian Education for Northern Humboldt, and we all have family maker activities, and we stuff supply bags, and we send them up into areas that they don't have Zoom learning, but they have like internet on their phone at home, but the families get delivered bags with all the materials they need for the kids to do whatever projects they're recorded online. And we do home deliveries of supply sacks. We have a couple different individuals that take them out to places that they don't have internet, but would be able to get access on their phone to what's recorded. And so we record it so people can see it afterwards. So that's what we're doing.
Awesome. That's a lot. Thank you for sharing, Mary Kate. I see there's been a few more, a few others of you have shared in the chat box too, different strategies that you're using. This is really great. I really appreciate everybody who's shared what's working and what you're trying. And I hope we've shared some new ideas as well. I've got just a few slides before we wrap it up for the end of the day. A couple polls. So first, I'm curious. We looked at these strategies in the beginning, and I asked you which of these you're using. And now I'm curious, which of these strategies are you interested in exploring further? Some of you have said, I saw in the chat box, and I'd like to see some more information about that, the Alaska piece, or maybe the public radio broadcasting. So you should see on your screen a poll with the same questions. Which of the following strategies are you interested in exploring further? And if you could, again, check all that apply. That should come up there, but I know that we only have a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to go ahead and keep talking and make sure that there it is. Maybe it's just a lag on my end here, but go ahead and check all of those that apply, that you're interested in exploring, that you've heard from each other and you've heard from us. We'd also, we'll go ahead and I think we can leave that poll up as you're responding. I see many of you are checking home family kits or maybe some small group strategies. We have another poll here. This is just a quick poll that we'll keep private. We'd like your feedback, your honest feedback, which is why we keep this other poll private. So you feel free to be very candid in your responses. Was this a beneficial session? And will you share information with someone? So once you've responded to the first poll, if you could go ahead and give us your honest answer, this will help us make future sessions, refine future sessions, and make sure that we're meeting your needs. So thank you for responding to that. I definitely appreciate your feedback there. Meanwhile, while I talk through some events, because I know some of you may have to jump off at the bottom of the hour, we have one final feedback poll where you will see those session objectives that I went through at the beginning. I promise it'll take just a couple of quick minutes. You can grab that link and tell us, give us your feedback on those objectives and how well we met those. So if you could make sure to do that, please, before you sign off. In the meantime, while you're doing all of that, I'll put some dates up on the screen so you can see what's coming up. We will continue with our distance learning sessions on Tuesday, 3 to 4 Eastern time, same place, same time. We got coming up some collaboration tools, some collaborating online, some tools for collaborating. Coming up in March, we have a session on audio video recording as well as virtual assessment. And then here we have a whole slew of general and program specific events coming up. We do have, our talking circle and talking stick series for your grant program area. We hope to see you there. We also have some 2 meetings coming up related to project planning and reporting. One for new grantees on February 18th, and then another one for continuing grantees on February 24th. So watch for those meeting invites and mark your calendars. Finally, we'll end with our OIE contacts, emails, and names if you need to reach out to the technical assistance team or somebody at OIE, here's your contact information. Just always that reminder to please, if you're going to email, to include your grantee name and that PR number. That really helps those folks at Department of Ed keep track of your requests and your questions and make sure they're answered in a timely way. Okay.
Well, and Tracy, as you're wrapping up, since we have 30 seconds left, Allison had also messaged that she'd like to share some of the things that they're doing with their high school students to kind of provide that other end of the look versus some of what we're doing with the younger kiddos.
Okay, great.
Hi. What we did with our high school students, besides expanding our native maker workshops on the weekends, where students in groups of 6 boys and 6 girls, they meet with mentors and they learn about cultural heritage in a place that's of cultural significance. We're doing that, but we've expanded because of the closing of the school buildings. Students that are in CTE programs that need to do shop work to get their CTE progress, we've implemented internships. So we've hired through the community different students that are working at sites, and they're working with people learning how to do what they would be learning in the classroom, but actually doing actual work with a company. So like an example, we have a student who's in 10th grade and he's getting work study program credit with his high school and our community college while he's working in our facility and getting hands-on knowledge of the work. So I just wanted to share that real quick. So you don't have to think about 12 kids, 6 kids, every kid counts. And so just helping one kid at a time is helping kids.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Allison. So we're at the bottom of the hour. I know many of you have to jump off, but we'll hang out for maybe another minute or two in case anyone else wants to share or maybe ask an outgoing question. Thank you everybody for joining us and for sharing the good work that you're doing, and all the creative ways that you're finding to overcome these challenges.